Thank you and welcome back. Our second workshop today looks at how exactly does ADHD affect academic achievement. Our presenter is Dr. Oksana Haggerty. Not only is she the better half of the guy who signs my paycheck, Dr. Oksana Haggerty is an educational and developmental psychologist who serves as a learning specialist and assistant director of the Center for Student Success at Beacon College. She specializes in academic support, cognitive abilities, learning disability interventions, and educational and developmental psychology. For 12 years, she served as an associate professor at Luhansk Taras Shevchenko National University in the Ukraine, teaching practical, methodological, and theoretical courses in developmental and educational psychology. That was a tongue twister. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Oksana Haggerty.
Hello, everybody. You probably heard that I'm from Ukraine, so nowadays it's an attention grabber. So I'm sure that my presentation will get a lot of attention, hopefully for a different reason. So as Daryl mentioned, I spent 12 years in the classroom, and now I've been a learning specialist for 5 years. So I've seen students with educational challenges both in the classroom and then outside of the classroom. And arguably, for me personally, the most challenging condition has always been ADHD. I've been fascinated by this condition, and I started digging deeper, and my presentation is the result of my own exploration of ADHD as a condition that can make students unavailable for learning. First, statistics. In 2016, 9% of children and adolescents in the United States had the diagnosis of ADHD. But if you look at the age distribution of those diagnoses, you will see that the majority of the diagnoses come during the teenage and adolescent years, a little less during elementary school, and very few during kindergarten years. And you would say, why is this the case? Why ADHD is being diagnosed during school more than it's being diagnosed earlier or later in life? This is a lifelong condition. It's not that it appears or starts later in life. People are born with it. So why is that? And the answer is because ADHD affects learning. So the majority of diagnoses come when students enter schools, because this is the condition that makes it specifically very difficult to access educational material. So today, we'll talk about how this is happening. First of all, let's think about the problems in the classroom. What kind of problems do we have in the classroom? The first and foremost, students cannot do the work. You've never seen them do the work. Or students can do the work, but they lack mastery, fluency, and accuracy. This is usually specific learning disabilities. So these are skill deficits. They have difficulty doing the work. But these are not all problems that we see in the classrooms. What if you know that the student can do the work, and you have even seen the student do the work independently, fluently, and proficiently, but they just won't? Or, along the same lines, they will, but under very limited circumstances, for example, when they're interested or under pressure, they will, but at the wrong time, in the wrong place, wrong assignment. They will, but too little and too much. So they can read for 10 minutes and then play video games for several hours. Speaking about attention problems, how can a person with attention problems play video games for several hours? In other words, ADHD has nothing to do with how smart students are. ADHD makes them unavailable for learning. And this is probably the reason why National Center for Learning Disabilities decided to use the term not learning issues, but learning and attention issues, because of the profound influence or impact attentional issues have on academic achievement. One little thing. So you probably heard, I've been an educator all my life, and so students come to us with diagnosis. They come to us with clinical diagnosis. So how is ADHD diagnosed? And this was my question. I just wanted to understand how medical professionals diagnose ADHD. If you look at the standard procedure of diagnosing ADHD, you will see a clinical interview, and you will see certain checklists and rating scales. Look, teacher rating scale, parent rating scale. What is happening? These are indirect assessments. You ask somebody, or even the person himself, about the behavior. There are no tests of ADHD per se. DSM-5 suggests that individuals with ADHD may exhibit cognitive problems on tests of attention. You would say, it's attention deficit disorder. Why can't we just give a test of attention and establish ADHD? So they may exhibit some attentional deficits, they may exhibit executive functional deficits, even memory deficits, but those tests are not specific enough to establish ADHD as a condition. Why is that? And the main reason is symptoms of ADHD vary depending on the context. And again, this is the introductory part of my presentation. Here, I'm just establishing the problem. I'm trying to show how really diverse and difficult and complex this problem is. So, symptoms of ADHD depend on the context. And this is a list of contexts in which you won't see symptoms of attention deficit. First and foremost, when students are interested, they do not exhibit symptoms of attention deficit. When students are under pressure, when they feel like they have a gun to their head, they won't exhibit symptoms of ADHD. Continuously and immediately reinforced or rewarded. Everything is fine with attention. Under close supervision, one-on-one, no symptoms of ADHD or fewer. In novel settings, take a group of students to a new setting, and you won't see as many attention problems as you see in the traditional classroom. Consistent external stimulation, especially electronic screens. Students can play video games, surf the web, watch YouTube videos for hours. Electronic stimulation makes ADHD symptoms almost undetectable. And interacting in one-on-one situations, or when the number of stimuli to attend to is reduced. So this is the list that kind of explains why there is no test of ADHD. Because you cannot test something that depends on the context, right? We know that to diagnose ADHD, students have to exhibit six out of 9 symptoms of inattention and or hyperactivity and impulsivity. And they should persist for at least 6 months. These are the symptoms of inattention. Careless mistakes, difficulty sustaining attention, does not seem to listen, lose things, and easily distracted. And Dr. Thomas Brown, one of the lead specialists in ADHD, said, well, if you read these symptoms, you will say, well, I kind of have it from time to time, right? There's nothing unusual here. So he says that all characteristics of ADHD are problems that we all have. Individuals with ADHD have this problem have more difficulty with this problem more of the time. But let's think about inattention outside of the clinical field. And let's think about inattention as it presents itself in the classroom. What is happening? And why do they make careless mistakes? And why don't they seem to listen? What is happening to them? There are four premises here to understand inattention. First and foremost, everything we do in life is essentially about learning. We learn every single second of our life. We receive reinforcement, attention from the environment, or our environment ignores us. But everything we do is about learning. Education organizes learning, but the rest is just our spontaneous learning. We scan the environment for relevant stimuli to engage in the behavior that will produce reinforcement. We just want to make sense of the environment, because reinforcement or a punishment will help us make sense of the environment. So what is attention? Attention is a gate that filters candidates for reinforcement. Attention deficit means that the gate is broken. We expose ourselves to a larger number of events. And the last, it's the number of events in time, not the time per se, that causes all the forgetting. It's the number of events in time. We all remember our honeymoon because it was once or maybe twice in life, right? No matter how much time passes, we remember every single detail, right? Because it's not about time. It's about the number of events in time. And kids with ADHD expose themselves to a larger number of events. But this is not it. So is it good or bad to be exposed to a larger number of events? First of all, behavior is more varied. Students with ADHD are more creative because they take more from the environment. What we do not see, they may see, and they don't see what we see. So we see different things in the same situations. But unfortunately, their behavior is also less stable. If you ever had a cook who has ADHD, they never follow recipes. And sometimes the outcome will be wonderful, and sometimes the outcome will be terrible. So this is the result of the behavior being less stable, maybe good, it may be bad. Now, my favorite, absolutely favorite symptom of ADHD, impulsivity. These are the criteria from DSM-5. They students have difficulty waiting in turn, interrupt, does not follow through, has difficulty organizing, they're very messy and random, and don't like tasks that require sustained mental effort. Why is that? What is that? The impulsivity is explained by these two very complicated phrases. I know I'm a non-native speaker, but these phrases are difficult, I'm sure, even for you. So it says, steeper delay of reinforcement gradient, consequences lose their power faster, and credit allocation challenges. Let me explain what it means. First, steeper delay of reinforcement gradient. This is the traditional, very definitional representation of the relative power of consequences. Which consequence is the most powerful? Something that comes immediately and something that comes certainly. We will do everything for something that we know it will be right here, right now, and I'm sure it will be here. Next one is immediate but uncertain. And this is gambling, for example. It comes immediately, but it's 50-50. Then future certain. Many smoking prevention campaigns are based on future certain consequences. The moment medical professionals were able to explain to us that while if you're smoking now, in the future, you may have medical consequences, this became a powerful reinforcement procedure for many people. because they began to believe that something that may happen in the future, even very distant future, is still quite certain. And the least powerful consequence is future uncertain. Something that is only coming in the future and you don't know if it comes is very, very weak. So I said that students with ADHD have steeper delay of reinforcement gradient. For them, nothing in the future exists. And it's not a cognitive challenge. It's not that they cannot think about the future. They are discounting the pleasure that is coming in the future. Because for them, because of their physiological organization, what is coming here and now is more powerful. Let's see how it works. An old English adage, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush, right? A bird in the hand is something that is immediate and certain. I already have it in my hand. Two in the bush is something that is in the future and uncertain because I'm not sure I can catch those birds, right? What would you choose? A bird in the hand, right? Would you say that this is an impulsive choice? No, it's common sense, right? We're prudent, it's common sense, we'll choose one bird in the hand. But let me make it a little more complicated. If I say 4 in the bush and 1 in the hand, what would you choose? You'd probably go for 4, right? Although it's future, although it's uncertain, but it's more. And why would you do that? Because you can see those 4 birds in the bush in your mental eyes. But students with ADHD, here's what they see. The moment you say a bird, they begin thinking, a bird? Is it a duck? A rubber duck? Or maybe it's a chicken sandwich. I'm hungry and probably my dog is hungry and tomorrow is my birthday. And at that very moment, I'm sure there are many educators in the room. Do you remember this blank look in the eyes? You say, so are you taking 1 bird or 4 birds? And the kid is saying, what 4 birds? Because you know he can see 1 bird in the hand, right? And those 4 birds are lost. Because it's the number of events in time. They expose themselves to a larger number of events. This is how it's working. So what do we do on the front end? We all, educators or parents of children with ADHD, we are very good, I believe, at providing the right cues. We know that we need to give a lot of attention. So if we want a kid to think about 4 birds in the bush, we need to make sure that we give attention to 4 birds in the bush, or give time, or repeat, or say it many times. The number of competing states. There should be 4 birds in the bush, and 4 birds in the bush, and that's it. Not 4 cats in the bush or something else in the bush. It should be like 4 birds in the bush. And the relevant salience of each of the ensemble of traces. So how colorful, loud, sharp those 4 birds are. So we know that we just need to give more attention on the front end. We need to limit the number of competing states. And we need to cue. We need to provide color cues, position cues, movement cues, voice cues, all sorts of cues. We are good at that. Arguably, the entire methods of education as a field of study is all about cues, right? How we do it. We all know that. But let me tell you something. For behavior to happen, it's not only about the cue. It's not only about the antecedent. It's also about the consequence, right? And we just said that students, when they have ADHD, the power of consequence changes with time. That's why the behavior is not happening. You may invite a student as a learning specialist to your office and have the best visual schedule and track all the assignments. These are cues. It's wonderful. I feel good. He feels good. He leaves the room smiling. What happens? Nothing. Because there is no reinforcement, right? As long as there is no reinforcement, nothing will happen. Let me put it this way. I'll move. Because the reinforcement for students with ADHD needs to come the sooner, the better. And if it doesn't, the behavior doesn't happen. So what can happen on the back end? What kind of reinforcement is detrimental for students with ADHD? First of all, delayed, right? Future reinforcement, very weak. Oh, I'm sorry. Second, uncertain. Third, small. They really need something good to work for it. Then cumulatively significant. This is attendance policy. Those parents who have kids with ADHD know that the thinking is, what can one missed class do to me? Nothing. It's 4 or 5 that will get you kicked out of the course, but not 1. So any consequence which is only cumulatively significant is very weak. Those who are trying to manage their weight, you always think, what can one cookie do to me? One cookie, nothing, but every cookie will. Under competition from other contingencies has been used before, and response efforts. So let's see what we can do on the back end in terms of consequences, not cues, to make sure that the behavior is happening. So if the consequence is delayed, first of all, you can use explicit direct instruction. The entire field of explicit direct instruction is about providing reinforcement as soon as you can. Fast-paced instruction. I, as an educator, don't like the accommodation. Give them more time. Because when you give more time, you give less reinforcement, right? The kid is left alone to his own wits. There is no reinforcement coming from you. More time is not a good idea. So fast-paced instruction, because fast-paced instruction provides more reinforcement. It keeps them going. Tokens and other bridges. You probably cannot provide reinforcement right away all the time, but you can use tokens and other different sorts of bridges. Next one is uncertain reinforcement. We know it's very weak. We know students do not, especially students with ADHD, do not like uncertain reinforcement. First and foremost, please, no excuses. Because excuses make any consequence that we as educators provide uncertain, because every time the student will be working on a paper, if an excuse was given in the past, the student will say, well, I should submit it on Tuesday, but I was excused, maybe I can submit it on Wednesday. So anything that will make consequence uncertain will make it weak. Then you probably need to say what the reinforcement is going to be, what reward is coming. There is an interesting research in which a phrase, sit and wait quietly, and you might get a coupon, which is a token, was more powerful than sit and wait quietly. You just need to talk about the positive consequences that engaging in this or that behavior will give the student. The student needs to know. Last one is, that's from a college level, and I know that our instructors do it very often, providing samples. You need to give a sample of intended output. Students need to know what exactly you're expecting from them to make the consequence more certain. Next one is small reinforcement. This is a big problem in educational systems. We really don't have anything powerful to reward or punish our students. As Patrick Fryman once said, if we could use open flame as punishment and heroin as reinforcement, the process of teaching appropriate behavior to our children would be much easier. But we cannot do it. We don't have anything that powerful, right? We have grades, we have praise, maybe Disney trips, but they're small for our children. It's almost nothing. So what can we do then? Repeat. Because students do not learn by listening. They learn by repetition with contrast. Every time you repeat something, their life should become a little better. And after you repeat it 100 times, the behavior will be in place. And that's where 10,000 rule is coming from, 10,000 hour rule. To become proficient in any area, you really need to put a lot of time, a lot of repetition, a lot of practice. Next one, cumulatively significant. We all struggle with attendance policy, right? As I said. One good thing is to visualize it. And there is a good example in Daniels and Bailey book. In a company, one of the employees was struggling with missing a lot of work. So the manager called the guy into his office and literally plotted the day in the calendar when the person will be terminated if he continues to miss work at the same rate. This visualization and explaining, here's what it is and here's what it's going to look like, really was very powerful. Next one is reinforcement under competition from other contingencies. You know as parents, I'm sure, that there is a huge difference between asking the students to go and do homework when a student is playing a video game and asking a student to do homework when a student is doing household chores, right? So we need to mind this hedonic contrast because it's very important for students with ADHD. Again, steeper delay of reinforcement gradient. Something needs to be immediate and now and certain and big and so on and so forth. How often a particular consequence has been used before? We really have to be creative to motivate students with ADHD. And the last one, response effort. Make doing the right thing easier. Make libraries accessible, make computers accessible, printers accessible, so there should be nothing in between the student and academic achievement. So response effort should be minimal if you want a student to do the right thing. Now, credit allocation challenges. This is the second challenge that impulsivity gives students in the classroom. What is credit allocation challenges? One more very, very difficult passage. Rich environments present the potential for disastrously quick loss of ability to allocate credit to the correct precedent. What does it mean? The student hears at the end of the class session, "Good job, you guys," or the student receives a graded paper 2 weeks after he or she submitted this paper. How does the student know what exactly is being graded? What exactly is being praised? What kind of behavior was good and it's graded as A, and what kind of behavior was bad and graded as C or F? So the student probably doesn't know. And why is that? Because while you had 10 events in your life between the time the student submitted the paper and 2 weeks later when you gave this paper back, the student had 100 events in his life. And he obviously just does not remember which event or which behavior we are grading or talking about. So there is, again, an old English adage, catch them being good. It's very important to catch students with ADHD doing something right and reinforce it and reward it and make sure that they know about it, because this is the only way we really can change their behavior. Now, hyperactivity. These are the symptoms of hyperactivity, and I'm sure you've seen it. You know that this is from DSM-5. But let's think about what it looks like in the classroom and why it looks like that in the classroom. Imagine I hope there are no rocket scientists in the audience. If there are none, then imagine yourself at a lecture on rocket science. Using Bloom's model, evaluate your chances of making sense of what is going on around you. Do you have any prerequisite skills, knowledge, or competencies to understand the material? Probably none, right? Do you have any interests in the rocket science? Any attitudes, any self-views that you can do rocket science? Probably not. Then my question is, how soon will you begin to fidget with hands and feet, leave seat, feel restless, be on the go, and talk excessively, which are the manifestations of hyperactivity? Do you expect it to happen soon? Like checking your emails, maybe Facebook, talking to your neighbor and something. So whenever the environment does not make sense for us, we become hyperactive. Because why do we become hyperactive? And what is hyperactivity? What's the purpose of hyperactivity? We become hyperactive because hyperactivity is really scanning the environment for relevant stimuli to engage in the behavior that will produce reinforcement. If there is nothing in the classroom that can produce reinforcement, it's not making sense to me, I'll become hyperactive. So do our students, they also become hyperactive, except to settle, unlike us, they need something really, really big. And when I say big, and I hope by this time we kind of came to this conclusion, we are not only talking about big Q, which is colorful, right? Bright, loud, and so on and so forth. It's not about really big Q. It's more about reinforcement that needs to be immediate, that needs to be certain, that needs to be new, easy, all at once, because cumulative doesn't work, better than the alternative. So only in this situation we will be making sense of the environment, and we won't be engaging in the behaviors that can be classified as hyperactive. Last but not the least, and this is the most important part for me, because we are probably all surprised that ADHD is affecting American school kids all around the world, not only America. I'm sorry for saying that, all over the world. It's more and more and more and more and more. It seems like it's an epidemic, right? But let's think about it. And this is a very interesting sentence from DSM-5. Symptoms of ADHD are common among children placed in academic settings that are inappropriate to their intellectual ability. So this is from hyperactivity. We just talked about that. Whenever it's difficult for a student to make sense of what is going on in the classroom, the kid begins to exhibit symptoms of ADHD: impulsivity, hyperactivity, and attention. So are we going back to the drawing board now? And let's see where we really, and I do believe in ADHD. I think ADHD is a serious neurological condition that can run the entire life. I think it is. But I don't think that every single situation when you see a kid being rude, impulsive, hyperactive, inattentive, I don't think it's every single time is ADHD. There can be something else. So let's quickly look at what it can be. We know, according to Benjamin Bloom, 80 to 90% of the variation in school achievement is accounted for interactions among cognitive entry behaviors, affective entry characteristics, and quality of instruction. Cognitive entry behaviors are our skills and knowledge and prerequisite skills, knowledge, and competencies that we need to understand what is going on in the classroom. So what if a student comes into the classroom and he doesn't have those? Or he has those, but they are not trained to mastery? Because only if you train a skill, knowledge, or competency to a mastery level. The skill will be retained, and it will endure distractions and fatigue. It will be stable. It can be used in new situations, and new skills can be developed. So, if cognitive entry behaviors are not there, then you will see some kind of distractibility. You will see varied behavior, which can be misunderstood as ADHD, but it's not. It's a different sort of challenge. Then what about effective entry characteristics? We know what they are. They are interests, self-views, and attitudes to the material. We know that students with ADHD do not like engaging in non-self-selected tasks. When they select a task, they can engage and do it for hours. Non-self-selected tasks, difficult. Again, if you cannot do something, if you struggle doing something, what are the chances of you engaging in that behavior? Well, very low. You'll probably avoid it, right? And so, again, when you train something to perfection, to mastery level, the chances of engaging in the behavior, seeking this behavior, reading, writing, or doing math will be much higher. But also there are some societal cues that help students engage in the behavior. And I love giving an example of Elon Musk, who just made mathematics fashionable again. Because of Tesla, because of artificial intelligence, because of neural networks, it's all math. So math in colleges is fashionable again. So it improves effective entry characteristics. And the last one is quality of instruction. Cues, reinforcement, feedback, and correctives. We just said that for instruction to be of high quality, it's not enough to provide the right cues, which we all were trained to provide. It's also important to provide reinforcement. Immediate, certain, new, better than the alternative, and so on and so forth. So where's ADHD in all this? Again, I wanted to point your attention to the fact that if a skill, prerequisite skill, is not trained to mastery, you will see distractibility, you will see fatigue, you will see irritability too. You will see the behavior that is less stable. Next one, if a task is not self-selected, if a kid does not want to do something, it's very hard to make a student really engaging in doing that. And the last one, it's very important to provide not only cues, but also reinforcement, and so the right reinforcement too. In following the requirements of direct and explicit instruction, I wanted to engage you in some active student response exercises. Let's read the question, and let's say whether it's true or false. ADHD and IQ are related. The higher the IQ, the less pronounced ADHD symptoms are. No, it's false, and we now know it's not only false about IQ, it's also false about measures of attention, executive function, and memory, because ADHD is very sensitive to the context. It's not the function per se, it's the function in the context, which is cue, antecedent, and result, consequence, reinforcement, or punishment. Next one, under which conditions can individuals with ADHD make themselves pay attention? When the task is interesting to them, when the environment is unfamiliar and new, and when they feel like they have a gun to their head. All of the above, A, B, and C. So these are the contexts that really change how our attention functions. And the last one, which statement is true? All people have trouble with attention from time to time, but people with ADHD have more trouble with it more of the time. In this regard, ADHD is more like hypertension than mumps or measles. And the other one is ADHD has a number of unique or positive characteristics that people without ADHD do not have. In this regard, ADHD is more like mumps or measles than hypertension. Do we all have trouble with attention, depending on the context? While students with ADHD will have more trouble with attention more of the time. So it's more like hypertension, because we all engage in attentional exercises, and students with ADHD just have more trouble with them. So it's A. Well, this is the end of my presentation, and I'm very grateful and thankful that you listened. You didn't fidget. You didn't check your Facebook too often. I hope I provided some cues and some reinforcements that worked. So I'll be glad to answer any questions you have.
Between ADD and ADHD,
Yes.
and what the differences are.
I have to follow DSM-5, so I do make a distinction: ADD, attention deficit, and then combined type attention deficit, inattention, impulsivity, hyperactivity. Yes, I would just say that to me, in the classroom, kids with ADD, and honestly, this is probably the most difficult type, because it's like white noise all the time. Even cues do not work. If a kid is hyperactive, cues, but then you can provide reinforcement, punishment, or reward, and it will work. When a kid has ADD, attention, pure attention deficit, it's like it's white noise. It never makes it there. So yes, I do make a difference, and I think a little more research is needed into understanding the interaction and how it works. But at this point, I would say that ADD is probably the most challenging type of ADHD of ADHD disorder. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you for that presentation. I just want to make a comment. My son transferred from another university, and one of the things that led me to realize he needed to transfer, he definitely has ADD in addition to learning differences, was when he said that he couldn't remember anything he had learned in the 2 years that he was there. And the first day he had classes here, I said to him, "So how'd it go?" And he said, "It was fun." And I was like, "Fun?" And I said, "Yes, the classes were," he had had 3 classes. "The classes were fun, the professors were fun." So big kudos to Beacon professors on that one.
Thank you. Thank you. Sure, and this is a good, this is a very important statement. I do believe that when we work with students with ADHD, learning specialists are wonderful, but the majority of work is done by the faculty in the classroom, because they provide the cues and they provide reinforcements. We're just making sure it's not all falling apart, but it's very important for the faculty to be, they're the front liners here. And so, not that I don't believe that learning specialists can do much about ADHD, but I do believe that we can only do it together. So I do not believe in pull-out special education services. This is what I'm trying to say. The special education services should be in the classroom. They shouldn't be pull-out services, because with ADHD, it's really not much you can do. It should be happening in the classroom, right? Reinforcement and cues, the right reinforcement and the right cues should be in the classroom. And this is why I think Beacon College, if somebody is asking about our secret sauce, the secret sauce is that we are not pull-out services. The services are there, and we are the second line. Thank you.
What role do you see anxiety? I have 2 boys, different diagnosis. The Asperger's students, the freshman, but he has a combination, obviously, of the hyperactivity. The other one's not here, older, at a different school, but when his anxiety level, and it kind of increases with the nature of the studies, the credits, you see a response that is just kind of drops. So we've been trying to work around the amount of courses or the hours. He's gotten better at managing with some assistance, But I also know for him, without the scheduling, there is a short-term memory thing that's consistent. It has always been. And I tend to see it more as anxiety. I'm not always sure what's triggering that. Do you notice any difference or any cues?
Well, the living with ADHD is a very uncomfortable life. You are working twice as hard to make sense of what is going on around you, not because you are cognitively deficient, but because your reinforcement follows a different pace, a different pattern. So this average student needs, say, 1 reinforcement per minute. A student with ADHD needs 5 reinforcements per minute. So it's like living in a fog. It's like nothing, well, something is making sense, but not much. And obviously, if you have any amount of self-awareness, you become very frustrated about the situation. And so to me, in my own work with students with ADHD, and I work with students with who are juniors and seniors, it's really establishing some kind of structure in their life to clear the fog, and then making sure that that structure is reinforced every single time I see a student. So I understand where anxiety comes from. Some claim that anxiety is the internalization of ADHD symptoms, but it's a very uncomfortable existence because you kind of live in a world. It's like watching a movie that is too slow. Like you're used to the movies and on the fast forward, and your movie is too slow for you. This is what the world is. And obviously, you're very uncomfortable. Living for years in this world will create some emotional tensions, obviously. But thank you for this question.
Thank you for the comment about not pulling them out for the special education. Does that mean, though, that maybe we need to educate our professors and our teachers for earlier education? Because for my personal experience, the biggest issue with my daughter in the early education was that she needed to be pulled out for the special services. And that put her in a denial and in an anger and not want to admit what she needed help with, to the point that we got so many years later that she will be still in a denial, and that will keep her from learning.
Well, thank you for this question. It's near and dear to me, but I just wanted to make sure that I make myself clear. When I said it shouldn't be pull-out services, I didn't make it as a policy statement. I made it as an educator. I think it's much better if special education services are there in the classroom. I'm not sure we are prepared to provide those. But I'm a big proponent of universal design. When all the accommodations are built in the system, explicit direct instruction, a perfect way to teach not only students with specific learning disabilities, ADHD, but any student. So I believe that special education can provide cues for better instruction in the classroom. I think we just all should be doing that. What's wrong about providing reinforcement immediately? What's wrong about providing certain reinforcement so that the student knows? So what I think, and I'm seeing that, we're moving in the direction of universal design more and more. We're moving away from simply pulling out the kid with special needs or excusing the kid with special needs, which is even worse because we saw what modifications can do to a student, right? To the level of academic achievement. If you excuse too much, you provide all those accommodations almost to the ground level. So universal design, I would say, would be an answer. Explicit direct instruction, I would say, would be an answer. We are trying to move in that direction at Beacon, and we understand we have to undo years and years and years of educational practices and experiences anywhere in the world. So, but this is my kind of view on how we can help students with special needs. Pull-out services, they are not working for many, many different reasons, but this is just one of the reasons, but thank you.
Hi, Doctor. I really enjoyed your presentation. You stressed reinforcement, and you mentioned that it had to be clear, certain, immediate. I know perhaps you even used the term colorful or big, and that we should try to be creative. So my son is in a psychology class,
Mm-hmm.
intro to psychology. I'm sure he doesn't love the subject,
Mm-hmm.
knowing him. What does reinforcement in a class like that look like?
Mm-hmm. Those active student response exercises that I provided against the requirements of explicit instruction by the end of my presentation, they are given to students every, I think, 60 to 90 seconds. So you engage students. It can be choral response, it can be anything, but you engage students in responding. You check the understanding, but you also want to make sure that you provide, because when students are listening to you, listening is a passive activity. You don't know what is happening while the students are sitting and looking at you. You cannot guarantee that they're listening. You cannot guarantee that they understand what is going on, right? They may be thinking about something else. So active student response exercises like that, these are the elements of providing reinforcement in the classroom. The sooner the better. That's why I'm cautiously, but again, only cautiously optimistic, and colleagues just said that there is not much research about online education. But online education, artificial intelligence can provide reinforcement immediately. And in this regard, it can be a better way to teach kids with ADHD. It can be, but again, I felt that there was not much research, but I guess there isn't much research in that area. But hopefully, maybe moving in that direction, dealing with artificial intelligence, because no teacher can provide that amount of reinforcement all the time. I hope artificial intelligence can. Thank you.
Any additional questions?
My name's Linda Dew. I have two children. They both have ADHD and learning disabilities, a boy and a girl. I did find that immediate positive reinforcement worked very well. I love the way you did the dishes. I really like the fact the way you dried them properly and put them away. Or I like the way you did such and such. And then having them in sort of a greener environment with people next door with kids the same age so they can make friends more easily, et cetera. And praising them for having ADHD. Like one night they wanted to go out midnight because it started snowing. I said, sure. And it was in the summertime. I said, I feel sorry for people who don't have kids with ADHD because they must be awfully boring. And so they like it when I talk to them that way. I talk about famous people that have ADHD who are successful. And so you've got to keep building up that self-esteem and that positive immediate reinforcement.
Yes, because I do believe ADHD is not a deficit. It's
Right.
your ability to see more in the moment.
Yes.
It's more difficult. It's more challenging because you have to make sense of more stimuli in the moment, but you do see more,
Yes.
right? You do see some unusual characteristics of the situation. You do. So there is a lot to praise the students for. Unfortunately, by the time as they grow, because of limited cognitive entry behaviors, limited competences, skills, and knowledge, it becomes a very sad existence, right?
Yes.
And we saw that the amount of diagnosis of ADHD by teenage and adolescent years are growing, and they are growing because kids are feeling helpless. I can no longer sustain attention in the classroom because I was unavailable for learning in my elementary school, in my middle school, and now I'm crashing because I have nothing to base my understanding on. So, but there are so many things that are really positive about ADHD. And I think, and thank you for that, and I think we should celebrate that. And just like there is a wonderful book about dyslexic advantage, I hope there will be a book about ADHD advantage, which will show us what kind of advantages ADHD gives us.
And video games was a problem with both children. And so for my son, the neighbor boy was outdoor playing. I said, why don't you go out and play with him? He's like, yes, he was playing video games. Then finally I said to him, video games are for boys, a car is for a man. And I said, if you get rid of all your video games and sell them off, I will get you a car. Now, I know all parents can't do that, but it was a used car. But, he was around that right age, but he did. He got rid of everything. And that was my way. And I said, if you keep playing them, the car will go.
Perfect. This is the competition from other contingencies. It's doing homework versus doing playing video games, or doing homework versus doing household chores, right? He's giving up video games not to go and do homework. He's giving up video games to get a car. That's a very
Eventually,
different thing.
You know, eventually, a lot of kids do need a car, but that was the excuse.
Yeah. So we have to think about those little things because their reinforcement gradient, the way the reinforcement works for them is very, very different. So this idea was excellent because it really worked according to all the findings in ADHD field. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much, Dr. Haggerty, for your presentation.